April the 15th, 1912, is a day in history that most of us are familiar with. It was on that day, at 2:20 am, that RMS Titanic sank in the North Atlantic, taking more than 1,500 lives with her. After a 7-day recovery operation, the CS Mackay Bennett and her crew hauled 306 bodies from the ocean. The last recorded body to be pulled from the ocean by the Mackay Bennett, according to most records, was on April 21st. It was Sidney Leslie Goodwin, a fair-haired boy aged about 2 years. However, the recovery operation didn't end there, and in the weeks to come, more bodies were recovered by different vessels. By May of 1912, it was believed that all remaining collapsible lifeboats had been lost to the sea, and if there were any remaining, they would be overturned and void of life or any clues to whom they once held. However, on May the 13th, the crew of the White Star Line ship RMS Oceanic was sailing the North Atlantic some 200 miles, some sources say it was as much as 350 miles, clear of the location where the Titanic went down. There the crew spotted in the distance the waterlogged, almost submerged remnants of a small boat. When 6 men were sent to investigate, the long-dead, sun-beaten bodies of 2 Titanic firemen lay side by side in the boat, and beside them, dressed in a dinner jacket, was the corpse of first-class passenger 37-year-old Thompson Beattie. Sir Shane Leslie, who was on board RMS Oceanic when the lifeboat was found, recalled, "What followed was ghastly. 2 sailors could be seen, their hair bleached by exposure to sun and salt, and a third figure, wearing evening dress, flat on the benches. All 3 were dead, and the bodies had been tossing on the Atlantic swell under the open sky since it had seen the greatest of ocean liners sink. The 3 bodies were sewn into canvas bags with a steel bar at each end. Then, one after the other, the bodies were draped in the Union Jack. The burial services were read, and they splashed into the sea." This account, although featured in newspapers across the world in May and June of 1912, came to light again in 2016. This is because 3 first-generation photographs from that day, along with a short note graphically describing the discovery, were to be auctioned by auctioneers Henry Aldridge and Son in the English town of Devizes in the county of Wiltshire on St George's Day 2016. The first photograph shows 6 Oceanic crew members being lowered into the sea, the second shows them rowing out to the lifeboat in the distance, and the third shows 2 crew members standing on the partially submerged lifeboat known as Collapsible A. The note, dated May 13, 1912, reads, "I crossed the Atlantic 1 month after the Titanic catastrophe. We picked up one of the lifeboats with 2 unrecognisable corpses of a passenger in evening dress and 2 firemen wedged below the seats. The arms came off in the hands of the Oceanic boarding officer. Women's rings were found. The bodies were buried and the prayer service read. The lifeboat then hauled onto our deck when I cut this piece out of the boat covering." Contemporary online reports state that the author of the note is unknown, but Scottish newspaper the Montrose Standard, along with a few other British papers from the time, printed the account of one Mr. H.C. Church from Birmingham, an account that uses very similar language to what is written on the auctioned note, so maybe it was written by Mr. Church. When the ill-fated lifeboat was searched more thoroughly, a gold wedding ring with the inscription Edvard to Gerda was found. The ring, it was discovered, belonged to 30-year-old Gerda Lindell, the wife of Swedish shoemaker 36-year-old Edvard Lindell. They were from Helsingborg and were emigrating to Connecticut when they boarded the Titanic in Southampton as third-class passengers. Fellow Swede and survivor August Wennerstrom told of what transpired on Collapsible A that fateful night. When the lifeboat was washed off the deck of the Titanic, Wennerstrom and Edvard Lindell managed to climb onto it. They tried but failed to pull Gerda aboard the already crowded boat. When she was lost to the icy Atlantic, Edvard immediately fell into a state of inconsolable grief. He died soon after, and his body was thrown overboard. The ring was eventually handed over to Gerda's father, Niels Persson. The bodies of Edvard and Gerda Lindell were never recovered. Something that was considered somewhat of a mystery in British press was the discovery of a fur coat. However, US newspapers such as New York's Evening World reported that it belonged to a survivor named Richard Norris Williams, a popular tennis player from Philadelphia. When asked about his link to lifeboat Collapsible A, he stated that he had attempted to board it, but gave up in search for another boat, leaving his heavy coat behind which contained letters to his family. It's said that around 30 people boarded the lifeboat, but unable to pull the collapsible sides up for shelter, many of them perished in the following hours. 13 were eventually rescued alive, leaving the 3 remaining corpses on board. The identity of the aforementioned Thompson Beattie, who had died from exposure, was confirmed when his clothing was checked and a pocketbook with his name on it was found. Beattie of Chicago, but originally from Canada, was a wealthy landowner who had taken a trip to Europe with 2 friends, Thomas McCaffrey and John Hugo Ross. 3 days before boarding the Titanic, Beattie wrote to his mother in Ontario to notify her of his return. Shortly after the discovery of Collapsible A, Thompson Beattie's fate made the pages of the Canadian press. In an almost unbelievable twist, it was reported that his body was consigned to the waves on his mother's birthday at almost the exact same spot in the Atlantic where she had been born 82 years before, on a ship bound for Canada. "1989 saw the emergence of a little-known Brazilian rock band named Utopia. In those early days, the band, which consisted of 3 members, were no more than a cover band. They played small shows and did release an album in 1992, but it sold less than 100 copies. Overall, Utopia saw little success. That is until 1995. By then, they had gained 2 more band members and changed their name to Mamonas Assassinas, or Killer Breasts. The rejuvenated band now incorporated comedy, raunchy lyrics, as well as influences from a range of musical genres into their songs and stage performances. In a short space of time, and with only 1 album under their belts, they became extremely popular in Brazil and beyond. Their satirical lyrics, outrageous clothes, and colourful videos appealed to a large young audience, ultimately making them one of the biggest bands to come out of Brazil in the 1990s. In 1995, Mamonas Assassinas consisted of 24-year-old Alexander Alves, 25-year-old Bento Hinoto, 27-year-old Julio Hasek, and brothers Samuel and Sergio Hesta Oliveira, who were 22 and 26 respectively. Alas, their fame and lives were cut short. It was March 2nd, 1996, and they had just played the last gig of their national tour at the Mané Garrincha Stadium in front of a 40,000 strong crowd in the country's capital, Brasilia. The plan was that they would spend the next day at home relaxing before travelling to Portugal for more gig dates and interviews, but the Learjet 25 carrying all 5 band members crashed in the Serra da Cantareira mountain range near Sao Paulo at 11:15 p.m. The plane, which was on its final approach to Guarulhos International Airport, had reportedly experienced radar trouble even before takeoff. The pilot, Alberto Takeda, having aborted the first landing attempt, circled the airport to come in again, which is when the plane went down over the mountain range. All on board died. As well as the band members and the pilot Takeda, there was stage assistant Isaac Suuto, bodyguard Sergio Porto, and co-pilot Jorge Martins. The exact cause of the crash was not determined, but it's a tragic and all too familiar story involving touring artists who have unfortunately had their lives cut short in the same way. The causes of plane crashes in general are of course varied, but the reasons given in these kinds of cases are all too often due to lack of attention to air safety, the experience of the pilot, or the worthiness of the plane, usually caused by strict time restraints while on the road and a dedication to fulfilling gig dates on time. It was reported that the band had played 160 gigs in the last 6 months. Such was their popularity that Brazilian radio stations gave live broadcasts as firemen pulled their bodies from the wreckage. Hours later, on Sunday, March the 3rd, the same media attention was given to a street procession when ambulances brought the bodies to a morgue in downtown Sao Paulo. Fans lined the streets, and at the cordoned-off morgue, it's said that they gathered 10 deep to pay their respects. An all-night vigil was held before the funeral services took place on Monday, March the 4th. During an investigation into the events that preceded the crash, a home video featuring the band's keyboardist Julio Hasek surfaced. The amateur video was taken at a barbershop and shows Hasek shortly after getting his hair dyed. The man behind the camera was barber Nelson de Lima. In the closing seconds of the video, de Lima asked Hasek about the post-tour trip to Portugal. After making a joke about Portuguese women, Hasek can be heard saying that he had a dream the night before that a plane had crashed. Just before the video ends, he looks off to the side and shrugs his shoulders indifferently, but you get a sense of genuine concern. In fact, the people closest to him in the days following the disaster said that he was not himself in the hours leading up to the flight and that he appeared to be on edge.
Essa noite eu sonhei com um negócio assim, parecia que o avião caía, não sei. Quer dizer,
Did Julio Hasek have a foreboding premonition, or was it just a dream, maybe brought on by anxiety of the upcoming flight, that in turn happened to end in tragedy? Well, the Fortean Times wrote in 2012 that a medium known as Mother Dina, real name Benedicta Finaza, had predicted in December of 1995 that the band would all perish in an aircraft accident the following year. I personally had trouble believing this, but after checking, I did find an article from a Brazilian newspaper dated December 25, 1995. It says that Mother Dina had correctly predicted the deaths of Formula 1 racing driver Ayrton Senna and a Brazilian politician in 1994. It goes on to say that she believed Mamonas Assassinas would be involved in an accident of some kind in 1996. Following the death of the band, their music is still celebrated today, and their lives and the events leading up to the tragedy have been the subject of various documentaries and retrospective news features over the years. Neil Gordon Wilson, a resident of the city of Tulondo in Australia, was an eccentric man by all accounts. The people of Tulondo who knew him said he was a quiet and gentle man, with no close friends that they knew of. In the mid-1970s, Wilson, who was in his mid-20s at the time, suffered brain damage after a motorbike accident. Following the accident, Wilson was placed on medication to control his epilepsy, but according to his family, he would often fail to take it. The people in the neighbourhood grew used to his unusual behaviour, and over the years, some strange accounts have come forward. Local resident Mr. Graham Bedford reported that he had seen Neil Wilson standing in the long grass of the Tulondo swamplands in 1991. He was totally naked, Bedford said, except for a number of Coke cans tied to a piece of hay band around his chest. He said good day to me and then started to get dressed. Also during the early 90s, some duck hunters found a green plastic suit at the edge of Tulondo Reservoir, which they guessed was Neil's, as he was often seen in the reservoir. The fact is, Wilson was obsessed with the notion of taking on the form of a fish, a desire he'd had for some time. For as early as 1974, one tourist reported seeing Wilson in the Tulondo Channel attached to a piece of rope that was tied to a bridge railing. When Wilson was pulled from the channel naked, he explained that he was pretending to be a fish at the end of a fishing line. In November of 1995, at the age of 49, Mr. Wilson stayed at the family holiday home in Tulondo, where he was expected to remain for 3 weeks, but by the 27th of that month he was reported missing by his father. Police found medication for diabetes and epilepsy in the house, and, judging by the number of pills, they were able to deduce that he had stopped taking them 10 days earlier. On the afternoon of November 27, 1995, a police helicopter spotted a green mass in a paddock a short distance from Tulondo Reservoir. On investigation, it was found to be a plastic bodysuit. Inside was the badly decomposed body of Neil Gordon Wilson. The carefully double-stitched outfit was made up of 3 layers: an outer vinyl layer, a layer of carpet, and an inner vinyl layer. It included 4 zips, a headpiece with eye holes, mittens, and a mermaid-type tail made from the inner tube of a tyre. Inside the holiday home, police found a second similar intricately made suit, as well as a sewing machine, bits of old rubber, and vinyl sheet cut-offs. It was believed that Wilson had spent a great deal of time, probably even years, designing various prototypes of his outfit, which was made from discarded materials collected from the local tip. In a statement to Coroner Graham Johnstone, Senior Constable Kerry Allen estimated that on or around November 20th, Wilson put the bodysuit into a wheelbarrow and wheeled it 100 metres north into the paddock opposite the holiday home. He said that Mr. Wilson must have then covered himself in soap and water so that he could easily slip into it. He then zipped up the suit using a padlock and a wire. Constable Allen then put forward a likely cause of death. He thought it likely that lack of food, medication and the exertion of walking around in a thick vinyl insulated suit on a hot November day had brought on a seizure. Caught in the middle of a wide paddock and unable to move, Wilson would have succumbed to the heat. Coroner Johnstone's official report deemed that Wilson had likely died of asphyxiation triggered by a seizure. A year before his death, Wilson took this self-portrait photograph at the edge of Toulondo Reservoir. The tragic story caught the imagination of Marcia Ferguson, who co-wrote a 2001 stage adaptation of Neil Gordon Wilson's life. The stage play, entitled Fishman, was performed by 15 young people with disabilities from the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence and was produced by the Back to Back Theatre in Geelong, Victoria. The production recognised Wilson as an artist who died in pursuit of his passion, with total disregard for others' perceptions. Fishman was performed at the Drama Theatre at the Geelong Arts Centre during August and September of 2001. Regarding the performance, Marcia Ferguson said, "We've just taken what was on public record. We wanted to show how acquired brain injury puts pressure on families, so we've imagined scenes with his parents and psychiatrists. The story is also told backwards from the moment of death to the moment of birth, because all embryos breathe like fish." But despite his state of mind and the sympathetic stance that most took, Neil Gordon Wilson is considered the winner of a 1995 Darwin Award according to DarwinAwards.com, a somewhat cruel accolade when you consider his situation. Conjoined twins, or Siamese twins as they were once commonly known, are a phenomenon once thought worthy of public exhibition. Although there are records of the condition dating back centuries, the original Siamese twins, as it were Chang and Eng Bunker, who became popular on the American and British theatre circuits in the 1820s and 30s. They were named the Siamese twins because of their country of origin, Siam, which of course later became Thailand. Little more than 40 years after Chang and Eng's popularity had waned, another set of so-called Siamese twins came to public attention in the late 19th century. This is the story of Rosa and Josefa Blazek. Rosa and Josefa were born in Bohemia, in what is now the Czech Republic, on January 20th, 1878. They were pygopicus twins, meaning they were joined at the pelvis. It was written in an 1889 edition of Scientific Review that, at their birth, the horrified parents took the advice of an old local woman who recommended that the children should be starved for a period of 8 days. When against all odds the twins survived, it was agreed that they should be kept alive. Several showmen appealed to the girls' parents for permission to exhibit them in exchange for cash. Some say their parents were against the idea at first, but by November of 1880, the girls were on show at the Egyptian Hall in London. London journalists for the popular Illustrated Police News, one of the earliest British newspapers, founded in 1864, wrote that they were bright, intelligent children and printed a drawing of them with their parents. The Blazek sisters went on to make a stage career for themselves, becoming famous across Europe, especially in Paris during the 1890s, entertaining audiences through song and violin duets. But by the turn of the 20th century, their popularity quickly evaporated due to poor management and overexposure. In 1906, reports appeared in newspapers across the US and the UK stating that an operation undertaken by a Professor Kukula had taken place in Prague, resulting in the twins being successfully separated. The articles even went into detail regarding how the sisters were doing well post-operation and were making steady recoveries. I'm not sure what prompted these reports, but the fact is it didn't happen. As well as sharing tissue and cartilage, they were also joined at the thoracic vertebrae. Because of that delicate fusion, any possibility of separation was deemed impossible at the time. It was reported in 1909 that Rosa and Josefa consulted doctors at a Prague hospital after Rosa had noticed a large abdominal swelling, and that it was the doctor's opinion that she was pregnant. The reported story goes on to say that Rosa denied it wholeheartedly, and her sister, who was certainly a reliable witness, supported her denial. Newspapers were soon filled with rumours of scandal. In some cases, the twins were depicted as sex-crazed, while others claimed Josefa was an unwilling victim. However, according to Rosa, she had only had intercourse with one man, but refused to reveal his identity. Before the matter could be investigated any further, word spread that Rosa had given birth to a healthy son, whom she named Franz. There was much speculation that the twins' manager was the father, but another man named Franz Dvorak, a soldier who later died in 1917 whilst fighting in World War I, was thought the most likely candidate. Although there is no proof of it, Rosa claimed to have married the soldier shortly before his death. As young Franz grew, he joined the twins' travelling show as the son of two mothers. They travelled to America and established a base in Chicago, but their tour was cut short when Rosa fell ill with influenza. Shortly after being admitted into a Chicago hospital on March 22, 1922, she slipped into a coma. An estranged brother of the sisters named Frank arrived at the hospital shortly after their admittance and became their spokesman once Josefa became too weak to talk. Frank's sudden appearance was treated as suspicious, and considering he had been absent for most of their life, many journalists and members of the public believed that he had turned up at their deathbed in the hope of inheriting their fortune. Josefa Blazek died on March 30, 1922. Rosa followed her 12 minutes later. They were 44 years old. Shortly after they died, it was revealed that they only had savings of $400 between them. The sisters were cremated and their ashes were handed over to their brother Frank. Even after their deaths, speculation continued regarding the story of little Franz. Many historians believe that the baby boy was nothing more than a publicity stunt. Radiographer George W. Brady took x-rays of the twins post-mortem, and it was his opinion that they may have died due to an intestinal obstruction, but emphasised that it was impossible to know for sure. While an autopsy confirmed that the sisters had separate uteri, the New York Times, among other publications, reported that, had a pregnancy happened, a vaginal delivery would have been improbable. Quoting radiographer George W. Brady, the New York Times wrote, "It's extremely improbable that there was ever a normal childbirth, as the shape of the pelvic structure would require a caesarean operation. No scar tissue can be seen to indicate that this operation was ever performed." It is known that Franz spent some time in an orphanage during his young life, and some believe that this is where he was acquired in the first place. His fate is currently unknown.